I was standing by the stove, watching as the toast began to burn on the old toaster. The crackling exhaust fan, a faithful companion to all my breakfasts, hummed overhead, mixing the air with the smell of scorched bread. It felt alive to me, the old heart of the house, always breathing in rhythm with my life. It was at that very moment that my daughter, Allison, without looking up from her phone, said quietly, "Mom, Caleb and I decided you should pay 3 times the bills. Unless, of course, you don't want us to move into the master bedroom." The words landed on the kitchen tile like dropped keys, dry, cold, and irreversible. On the counter, like an ominous sign, lay the envelope with the utility bills. The number on it was a warning that I somehow hadn't seen in time. Outside, I could hear the steady hum of the highway, a distant, lulling sea that I never reached. At night, when sleep wouldn't come, I'd listen to that sound and think that life was just like that a stream. You stand at the edge, and it flows past. Take a step, and it can carry you anywhere. I bought this house myself when I was 42. It was a perfectly ordinary house. Cheap siding, a porch that needed a lot of repair, and bushes that relentlessly clogged the gutter. I worked as a nurse, pulling night shifts at the hospital where the air was thick with the smell of chlorine and unfulfilled hopes. Coming home at dawn, I would sit in my rocking chair by the window and watch the world wake up. Neighbors walked their dogs, the school bus paused at the yellow sign, and the mail carrier would raise the red flag on my box. It was in this simple, repeating rhythm that I raised Allison. At 13, she tied her shoelaces more neatly than I sewed stitches. At 17, she made a list of colleges and taped it to the refrigerator, right next to my medication reminders. She grew up, but not in a void. I bought her textbooks from secondhand stores, walked her to the bus stop, and picked her up from work late at night. I pretended to fall asleep first so she wouldn't know how long I listened to her breathing through the thin wall. This house was ours. Mine on paper, but ours by habit. The cracked step we both tripped over, the hook by the sink where my rubber gloves hung, and the rocking chair that caught the morning sun. Caleb arrived quietly. He brought a cheap bouquet of roses in cellophane and a smile that was dazzlingly white, but not at all warm. I promised myself not to interfere. I knew young people had their own lives, and us, the elders, were meant to be silent and watch until they asked for help. He talked about projects that were about to take off and how they just needed to weather a couple of months. Those couple of months stretched on like hot asphalt on a summer day. Soon, his old pickup took a permanent spot at our curb, and a supermarket box hid the oil stains. Then his mother, Susan, came for a week, just until her apartment was treated for mold. Her suitcase stood by the door all spring, summer, and fall. She moved through the house like its owner. She moved the dish rack because it makes more sense that way, and took my old muffin tins to the garage, saying they should have been thrown out ages ago. I would pick up my small habits that she had knocked off the hook and patiently hang them back up. Sometimes I lost. "A triple share is fair, Mom," Allison repeated, not looking up from her phone. "There are 4 of us now." I looked at the bill again. Yes, the rates had gone up, but my contribution covered not only electricity and water, but also the refrigerator, gas for her car, and house insurance. And of course, my unspoken nights in the office, where I met families behind a curtain, delivering words that broke hearts, not bones, from helplessness. Why triple? My voice was calm, not wavering. "I only have one pension. and my savings will only last 6 months. Then it's time to find a side job, Caleb said, looking up from his phone. Or maybe rent out a room. It's a market, Margaret. You have to be flexible. His market smelled of cheap instant noodles. I wanted to scream that I had been flexible my whole life. I adapted to night shifts, to the smell of antiseptic, to people who left in less than a blink. But I stayed silent. Words are too valuable to waste. The rocking chair by the window now felt like forbidden territory. I sank into it, pressing my bare heels into the warm floorboards. In the glass reflection on the windowsill, where a half-empty mug of coffee sat, I saw myself, hair touched with silver, and thin hands that could find a vein on the first try. I knew the value of these hands. Allison knew it too, when she was little. Now, I wasn't so sure anymore. Or just clear out the master bedroom, Allison repeated, this time looking me straight in the eye. It's cramped for us. And then I understood that it wasn't about money. It was about who was alive in this house and who was just furniture. I gripped the armrests until my knuckles turned white. In that moment, a thought crashed into my mind. They weren't pushing me out of a room. They were pushing me out of my own life. Outside, an ambulance drove by with its siren off. Some signals we turn off ourselves so we don't bother anyone, I thought. And that's the biggest mistake. Just then, the house shivered slightly from a draft, and the rocking chair sighed along with me. Let it become my symbol. A symbol that I'm holding onto this wood, these lacquered armrests, like a lifeline on a moving bus. Everything that was mine had shrunk to these two curved pieces of wood and a view of the road. I didn't know how any of this had happened, but I knew for sure that this was an incident that would forever divide my life into before and after. The stakes rose unnoticed, like weeds pushing through the asphalt. First, Susan, with a pleasant smile, mentioned that my rocking chair creaked and ruined the look and suggested moving it to my bedroom. So, it won't be so bothersome, dear, she added. I laughed to myself. How could an object where you could simply sit and think bother anyone? Then Allison, with a show of concern, offered me a temporary spot in the guest room. It was a tiny room with no window, where the vacuum cleaner and boxes of Christmas decorations were kept. It's cooler in there, she explained as if doing me a favor, and it's closer to the bathroom. In reality, the room was closest to the old furnace. At night, it hummed like an engine going nowhere, drowning out the sound of the highway. I quietly moved my two pillowcases and an old frayed blanket. The rocking chair didn't fit. I left it in the living room, pushed against the wall in the corner where their feet had already worn down the carpet. One morning, I saw a new command on the fridge, written in Susan's handwriting, a kitchen schedule. I learned that my morning coffee was now optional because it was too much of an expense. I, for whom a hot cup of coffee was like a signal to start my heart before a shift, read this and was amazed at how quickly my habits had become raw materials for other people's rules. Then came the idea of a joint account, where I was expected to contribute a fair share. Fairness, it turned out, changed with the weather. When Caleb was in negotiations with his investors, I bought the gas for the car. When the project was almost ready, he bought the pizza, and I made the salad and cleaned the kitchen. One night, out of old habit, I went to the kitchen. I opened the fridge just to breathe in its cold air, just like I used to in the hospital ward after a code, when everyone scattered to their corners, some to the smoking area, some to the vending machine. In the dim light, I saw my labeled soup containers and an empty space where my yogurt had been just yesterday. Susan appeared quietly in the darkness like a ghost. "We ate it, dear," she said. "I forgot to tell you." That "we" rang in my chest like a spoon hitting glass. In the morning, I found Allison in my rocking chair. Her feet were propped on the armrest, her phone was held up to her face, and a laugh burst out of nowhere. I just stood there in the doorway. It's strange how sometimes you don't lack things, but the right to them. The right to say, "Get off, that's mine." The right to simply breathe your own air. My neighbor, Sam, waved to me from across the street. He lived alone, rode an old bike with a basket, and, to everyone's surprise, shoveled snow from every sidewalk until his shovel scraped on the bare asphalt. I nodded back. The flag in his yard would appear and disappear. He flew it not for holidays, but just when he felt like it. Sam was one of those people who hold on to silence tightly, like a fisherman holding a net. That day, he stopped at my mailbox and adjusted the red flag. Then he called me. "A package for you came to my address," he said without a fuss. "I'll leave it on your porch." When I opened the door, the package was gone, and Sam had already vanished. Inside, there was a plastic box with my old nursing pins. I thought I had lost them long ago. The note attached read, "Found these in your garbage can. Don't throw away what kept you afloat." The handwriting was neat, with no capital letters. I sat down on the steps. I could hear laughter from inside. Allison was telling Susan how someone embarrassingly did a push-up at a company party. I looked at my pins: silver wings, the department's emblem, a plastic card with a photo where my eyes looked genuinely rested. It was a rare shot. And in that moment, I realized I had an ally. Not a person, but the very memory of my own value. That evening, Caleb brought a long roll of papers. "My uncle offered us a chance to invest," he said. "I just need your consent for a small loan, mortgaging the house. We'll pay it all back. It's a great investment." I heard the word mortgage, and my stomach churned. I remembered the stairwell where I stood with a box of dishes when I was 25. I placed my palm on the table, showing them that this was my stop sign. "We are not touching the house," I said. "Never." "Mom, you're being dramatic," Allison sighed, pushing her hair tiredly from her face. "It's just a paper. No one's going to take the house." Sometimes, the highest price you pay isn't money, but respect. You either have it, or you have to buy it daily, like cheap junk. I nodded. Then I quietly drove to a shopping center by the highway and rented a P.O. box. The woman at the UPS counter asked, "Government or private?" I chose private, paid with cash, and hid the key at the bottom of my purse, where I always kept coins for the laundromat, even though I'd had a washing machine for years. For the first time in a long time, I took a step that I hadn't discussed with anyone. The cost of my existence had risen, but so had I, even if just by a millimeter. Sam caught me by the fence as I was putting the pillows out in the sun. The house was damp again, and the pipes were coughing. He was holding a thermos and two metal mugs. "No sugar," he said, as if he had always known how I liked my coffee. We drank it leaning against the old gate posts. He talked about fishing before dawn, about how you can see a thin red line of road beyond the field. And I suddenly heard our highway differently, not as noise, but as a promise. "Won't you come in?" I offered, feeling a little shy. I don't go into houses where other people's rules hang in the kitchen, he replied. I felt embarrassed, and seeing my confusion, he added, but if you want to walk to the lake tomorrow, I'll meet you at the Amber Donut Stand. I understood that sometimes a person just needs to walk to realize they're even capable of walking. The next day, we walked 3 miles along a pine-lined path. In the distance, we could see the white roofs of trailers, well-kept flower beds, plastic flamingos, and identical umbrellas. There were no fences, just boundaries marked by colorful pebbles. It's nice there, Sam said. People live a quiet life. They have their clubs. The bookmobile comes on Thursdays. It's a place where you're warmed by your neighbors, not by the furnace. I remained silent, and his words made me feel dizzy. I was so tired of a loud we and of my I dissolving into it. I longed to hear the whisper of my own name. I can introduce you to the manager, he said, as if in passing. They sometimes have small homes available. Clean, nothing extra. You like order, don't you? I nodded. I like boundaries, I corrected him, and for everything to be mine. Just then, my phone rang inside my windbreaker. The display showed Caleb's name. I pressed the reject button and felt a new kind of freedom in that soft click. Not apologize and rush back, but come back when it's convenient for me. Sam pretended not to notice. That same evening, I met with the manager, Miriam. She wrote everything in a paper notepad, not a tablet. She showed me a tiny house with a small porch. The window looked out onto a green lawn, the kitchen was perfectly clean, and the bedroom was very small, but full of air. If you decide, put down a deposit, and we'll talk about the timeline, Miriam said. I held a receipt from the bank in my hands. It was the $1,000 I had saved for a rainy day. And that day had come. I handed over the money, signed with a pen that wrote poorly, and ran my fingers along the wooden railing. I didn't need to ask anyone for permission. This was the moment after which promises stop being just words and become walls and doors. It was the point of no return. On the way back, I bought a small bell for the door from a hardware store. It rings when you open it, and it reminds you that movement is someone's presence. I decided to hang it on the guest room door, not as an alarm, but as a ringing sign that I am here. At home, I was met by the faces I had once wanted to make happy. Where were you, Mom? Allison placed her phone face down on the table, as if it were an important meeting. I was out for a walk, I replied. Susan was folding plastic bags into neat triangles, as if it were a crucial game. At our age, going out without telling anyone is selfish, she said. We worry. The word our sounded like a fly swatter. I shrugged. Worrying is a luxury you can afford while living on someone else's pension, I said quietly. They flinched. It was the first time I had used such precise words. That night, I put on my sneakers, took my set of keys off the hook I had put in with my ex-husband, and placed my documents, savings, and 2 photos into my bag, one from nursing school and one from Allison's graduation. I pulled a white box from the shelf that held my lace collar, which I had once sewn onto my blue uniform so as not to be completely in someone else's color. I hung the bell on the doorknob from the inside and lay down without taking my clothes off. For the first time in 6 months, I fell asleep instantly. In the morning, I realized that my truth had switched places with theirs. I used to think a strange house was a place with strange walls. It turned out it was a place where the walls were mine, but the rules were not. And so, leaving isn't a loss. It's a risk of becoming yourself. They surrounded me in the kitchen nook, their voices low. It's just signatures, Caleb explained, spreading out the papers. We'll do some renovations, then rent out a room, and things will be easier for everyone. Allison sat down silently beside me and placed a hand on my shoulder. I pressed my shoulder blades against the countertop, just like I used to during art massage in the hospital, to keep my balance. Mom, no one is kicking you out, she said, looking down at the floor. We just want to optimize our space. Susan took my muffin tins out of the oven, the ones I only took out once a month to fill the house with the smell of vanilla. She placed them on the table between us like evidence. These are outdated. We'll buy things ready-made. Times are different now. I looked at my old tins and something fragile, something that was both in them and in me, cracked, like glass in hot water. I won't sign, I said, and I'm not putting anything up as collateral. Allison tucked her hair behind her ear. It was the gesture of a schoolgirl answering a question at the board. I remembered how her hair smelled of shampoo when I braided it for her before her graduation. Mom, please, stop making everything so complicated. You're the one who complains about not having enough money. We want to help you. You know how credit scores work. It's just a technicality, pure math. Math is about clear connections, what goes with what and what comes from what. But with us, everything had become blurry, smeared. I felt my fingers tremble, as if air was building up inside me, pressing from the bottom up. My breathing became shallow, like people on the verge of panic. At the hospital, I would tell them, look at me, breathe in, for 4 counts, breathe out, for 6. I followed my own advice. Counting always helps when words fail. I'm not standing in the way of anything, I rasped. I'm protecting what I lived for. They exchanged glances, and for the first time, a genuine, unfeigned weariness flashed in Allison's eyes. Fine, she said. Then let's switch rooms. We need the space, and you'll manage in the guest room. The word switch was supposed to imply equality, but there was no equality. It was a command. Susan immediately unrolled the work plan. Move the bed. The rocking chair goes to the garage. The carpet gets replaced with a more neutral one. My rocking chair was on the list as a useless item, an obstacle to a future crib. They were already planning for someday. I went to the guest room. The bell on the door gave a quiet tinkle, like a faulty bell at a closed store. I sat on the edge of the narrow bed and felt the boards bend beneath me. In that moment, I almost broke. I desperately wanted to close my eyes and wake up in that early, cozy house, where it smelled of coffee and fresh air from the kitchen. In it, Allison was sitting at the table, drawing on napkins, inventing different names for herself to choose her future. I turned my palm over. Instead of names, there was a blue grid of veins and skin stretched tight, like a glove. That evening, I went out onto the porch. The highway hummed softly, as if something huge was rolling across a rug. In the neighboring yard, teenagers were shooting a basketball, and it hit the backboard with a dry, lonely echo, a rhythm that no one else was joining. I took out my notepad and wrote, I am not a slave. The letters were big and angular, as if I were writing a protest sign. And below that, I will leave without a scene. It was a decision that had been hanging in the air for a week. Now it had finally landed on paper and in my heart. In the morning, I discovered that the corner in the living room was empty. The chair was gone. Susan briskly announced, I put it in the garage, so it wouldn't be in the way. I went to the garage and saw my chair, laid on its side between boxes of light bulbs and an old monitor. Dust lay on its lacquered surface. On the seat were someone's pink hair roller and some foreign threads. I ran my hand along the back. The wood was cold and strange, and in that moment, instead of a scream, only one word escaped me. No, it wasn't loud, but I heard it. And I understood. Not all is lost. The plan came together on its own, on the fly, in between tasks. I took the envelope with the deposit receipt from the nightstand. The park was waiting for me. I needed transportation and help. I knocked on Sam's door. He opened it almost immediately, as if he had been expecting me. "Can you help me move a couple of boxes?" I asked without preamble. "I have a pickup," he replied. "I have rope, and I have time." He looked at me with a knowing expression. "Are you really ready?" I nodded. I wasn't just ready. I was already in motion. We agreed he would come by at night. Sam gave me a list: documents, medication, 2 sets of clothes, and one thing that reminds you of your life. Otherwise, you'll want to take the whole house. I smiled. That's exactly what I wanted. To take the house with me, not in boxes, but within myself. That day, I was like a grain of salt dissolving in soup, unnoticed, but completely changing its flavor. I moved quietly, packed things, and said, "Uh-huh," and "later," when they called me to discuss another business idea. Caleb suspected something was wrong and checked the mailbox. There were only junk mail flyers. He didn't know about my private P.O. box. Susan was counting the dishes and making a list of extra things. Anything of mine, in her opinion, was always extra. That night, Sam pulled up without his headlights on. The engine of his pickup gave a gentle cough, the sound of an old friend who needs no introduction. The bell on my door handle rang softly but decisively, like my own personal starting signal. We carried out 2 boxes of documents, a bag of clothes, a box of photos, and, together, without a word and without complaint, my rocking chair. It seemed to rejoice in the night air, like a bird escaping its cage for a moment. I ran my hand along the armrest, where over the years a warm indentation had formed from my elbow. Sam placed a soft cloth under the chair and tied it down, like a boat to the shore. "We're setting sail," he said with a smile. We worked quickly. My heart was not beating erratically, but in a rhythm like the cry of an owl somewhere high above. I glanced at the house, dark windows, with only a small glowing spot in one, the phone charger. My throat went dry, not from fear, but from the sense of finality. At the corner, near the cul-de-sac, Sam slowed down. He knew how to give time not with questions, but with pauses. I finally opened my eyes and saw a light flash on in the bedroom window. A shadow moved. We were leaving. "Margaret," Sam said, "if anyone stops us, I'll say you're my aunt and we're heading to the cabin." Nobody asked too many questions about ants. We drove to the trailer park. The gate lifted after he pressed the button twice. The streetlight softened the night, and a bluish light from a television spilled from the window of a house across the way. It smelled of boiled corn and laundry detergent. Miriam looked out in her robe, yawned, and smiled. "Welcome home." I placed the chair by the window where a sliver of sun would fall in the morning. Yes, even here it existed, just on a different side. The next day, I had my Social Security payments redirected to my P.O. box, called the insurance company, changed my address, and, the most satisfying part, turned off the automatic utility payment for the old house. This was not revenge. It was pure math. Let the new residents pay their own bills. It's fair. If it's a market, then it's a market for everyone. Sam helped me with 2 more trips. On the second night, Caleb woke up. He came out onto the porch in his bare feet and saw me holding a box. "What is that?" he asked. "My life," I replied. "The part I'm keeping for myself." He looked into the pickup, saw my chair, and froze. "You can't just take stuff. We're family." Family is a hammer word, often used to drive your own nails into the wall. I gestured toward the door. "Close it. It's cold." He ran to get Allison. She appeared on the doorstep in my robe, the one they had deemed extra. For a second, her face looked like it did when she was a girl, back when she had slept through the school bus. "Mom, where are you going?" she whispered. "Home," I said. "To my own home." She didn't understand, and she wasn't meant to understand right away. We drove off. Sam turned on the radio. Old songs played faintly, and suddenly, one note landed on the air so perfectly that I cried. Quietly, like when you're chopping onions. Sam turned up the volume and started to gently drum his thumb on the steering wheel. It was our own little movie without witnesses. 2 figures, 1 truck, an empty night road, and a chair tied to the back, like a heart on a string. The first morning in my new little house smelled of dust stirred by someone else's broom, and the cheap coffee Miriam had made in her old coffee maker until I bought my own. The sun laid a smooth stripe across the rocking chair, just as it always had. I sat, listening to the sprinklers hiss on the lawns like small snakes, and I thought, the sound of silence isn't emptiness. It's filled with small things that used to be drowned out by other people's voices. I felt a peace that belonged only to me. It wasn't loneliness. It was long-awaited freedom. That same day, Allison called, but I no longer felt anxious. My voice was calm when I explained that I had moved. "Mom, I know this sounds silly, but I found your address at the bus stop." I called, and a woman answered. She said, "You don't have to live where you apologize for everything." It was new. She just asked to come over and talk without a rush. And when she arrived, I didn't see the old Allison, but the little girl who once drew on napkins. She was confused, but the same spark was in her eyes that had been there in her childhood. She didn't ask me to come back or for money. She said honestly, "Mom, I'm so ashamed. I was so consumed with my own life that I didn't see yours." We spent the evening talking, sitting on the bench by my little house, and then she left, saying she would look for a job and take control of her own life. That was the greatest happiness for me, to see my daughter begin her own journey. And the most unexpected turn didn't happen where I expected it to. The social services office called the Thin Line and asked us to talk about our initiative at a senior center. It turned out there were many people like me, women and men who were called expenses, dead weight, inefficient, at home. Miriam, Sam, and I arrived, set up a thermos of coffee, arranged chairs, and started to talk. I spoke about how one day you pull your pins out of the trash can, and you realize that your dignity isn't disposable. And I saw a light flicker in people's eyes, small but stubborn. A month later, a person from the local newspaper came. They wrote an article, but without my photos. I asked for it that way. Let the name Margaret stay here, among those who know who I am. But the sound of my little bell was recognized throughout the park. Its ring became a signal not just of "I am here," but of "we are here." People started bringing old chairs, lamps, and discount catalogs. And somehow, For my personal story, a thin line straightened into a rope that others could hold on to. One evening, Allison and I sat on the porch of my little house. She said, "Mom, if you hadn't left, I wouldn't have understood that I have a life of my own." It was the most honest and cruelest lesson. Sometimes, to restore a connection, you have to break the familiar. A house is not walls, but boundaries. A family isn't we if there's no I. Freedom begins where you stop being afraid of loneliness and start being afraid of losing yourself. I ran my palm over the armrest of the rocking chair and thought, the highway outside still sounds like the sea. I don't know where the shore is, but I have learned to hold this thin line inside myself. And if someone needs it, I will extend it further.